to fellow survivors who have tuned in or downloaded the podcast. I would beg to differ, but despite forgetting once it was our Lord, I think our Lord is Sam Rockwell, and you know it. He is. I think he is the show's favorite actor, so I think he deserves the part. It's an interesting day if you're a political junkie like we are on the show. It looks like in the United States it's been a fairly interesting election result, and we're almost within 2 weeks of being in the post-Trump era, and that's going to be fun. It's going to be an enjoyable couple of weeks from here on in. And they're already talking about the post-Trump era of presidential film.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about it weeks and weeks ago about what that landscape could potentially look like. Again, we are trendsetters.
Well, I mean, first Joe Blow, next it's The Guardian. It's
next it's the
next thing you know, it's going to be bloody Ain't It Cool News. Is that still up? Is that website still there?
It is still a thing. I know there was some kind of hubbub and problem with Harry Knowles or something. Like, I think he got embroiled in the Me Too movement in some way or something. I don't know.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It's still a very ugly website. It is still there. But that was kind of the first big online movie thing. I remember that they gave a shit review to Rollerball, I think, back in the early 2000s, John McTiernan and Rollerball film.
Yeah.
And I think Harry Knowles actually got consulted by John McTiernan, called him and tried to fight him or something. Or
there was something like that, and I know that I think he was one of the guys that got challenged by Uwe Boll for the boxing tournament thing, and they got so big for a while. This is going back to early days of movie news and rumors, ladies and gentlemen, on the internet. Harry Knowles was actually a big proponent for, back in the early 2000s, for trying to get John Carter made into a movie. And he actually got brought on as a consult for when Jon Favreau was going to be doing it. And that was a weird alternative version where they tried to make it a modern day thing, but they couldn't quite work out how a cavalierman would equate in modern society and things. It's an interesting story about what if, and just this rise of this very ugly, very minimal website that used
I recommend
to be really
people, if you want a bit of a trip back into the past, do look at Ain't It Cool. One word. We're showing our age here, but this was actually a very influential website. It's like if you think of what Rotten Tomatoes kind of is today, but people send in death threats when they give a Star Wars film a bad review. But back then, the director was cool. I can't confirm it, but I remember hearing, here we go, Harry Knowles from Ain't It Cool News was invited by John McTiernan on a test screening of a film, Rollerball 2002, on Long Island sometime after the first test screening. And in his review of McTiernan's original cut, Knowles said that the movie is bad, but at least it's unapologetically hard R film with lots of nudity and some really brutal violence and rollerball scenes. But even as a work print, it was obvious how bad the action scenes were edited and the story was bad. The Rollerball edit I saw was one of the worst films I'd seen in my life. During in the theater, Knowles said. Knowles was also one of the people who read the original first draft of the script that McTiernan rejected, and that it was an amazing script who solved all the problems of the original film. So, this is the early 2000s. He was getting invited to, how do we go to Ain't It Cool News? It's not what we're supposed to be talking about.
I don't know. That's our thing. We get distracted and we don't know how we got here.
It's turned into an internet history lesson. It's an interesting piece of film history, but it was sort of the vanguard of what websites are today, really.
Yeah, pretty much. It certainly set the tone, I think, for what the alternative tone for movie reviews and TV show reviews compared to the likes of the Premiere magazine and the Guardian and those kind of higher brow, more kind of, I guess,
academic almost.
Yeah, kind of Oscar equivalent stories where these were much more kind of written by fans for fans, and you get that fandom and the almost conversational kind of style of it. It was kind of a bit of a birthplace of the written form of a podcast in some ways. They just talk about it, and they there'd be moments where you're reading through a review of something. So like I've digressed. I'm talking about another movie in this review. Let me get back on track. And it was like you wouldn't get that in any other highbrow.
This wasn't Roger Ebert,
exactly.
Academic guys who were talking about camera work and mise en scène, and like these are us, the shitbags of a world who liked hard R films with nudity and ultra violence, right? And
that's where it's all really cool.
This week, though, we got a stacked show, and I think that this show is going to be a choice one for the first one off the rank this year. We're going to be talking about the this week's chain film Girlfight, which we managed to find a copy of, not entirely legally, but hey, you don't want to offer it. You don't want to offer it. Well, that's not my problem. But we did actually. I can say personally, I've seen 2 legal films this week, which you both have seen this week. That are new releases. Remember new releases? They were a thing once upon a time. Wonder Woman 1984. And of course, the new Pixar film Soul, which went straight to Disney Plus. So it's actually going to be interesting. But for once, we've actually seen 3 of the same movies, which is a little bit out of a norm. So should we crack on and talk about Girlfight?
I think we should. Yeah. So when was the first time you watched Girlfight, Trav?
It probably would have been 20 years ago. It was one of those indie films that was doing the rounds at the time, had a bit of a reputation. It did really well at one of those big film festivals, South by Southwest or Sundance or something. Had done the festival tour, had a big reputation. Everyone was talking up its hot new star, and that it had this really powerful feminist message and blah blah blah. It was a real indie darling, I guess, at the time. Yeah,
because we had from like the very early 2000s, 2000 to like 2006, something like that. There seemed to be like at least one high-profile like indie movie that came out and just captured it. Like Sundance Film Festival seemed to be on a hot streak for just getting something, like Donnie Darko in 2001, this in 2002. We had Little Miss Sunshine, Garden State, all these ones that have got cult followings, and they just kind of broke into the mainstream a little bit more than your average indie movie. It was quite a nice little run for indie movies at that point. And we got introduced to a lot of interesting talent. And as you said, this is the feature film debut for Michelle Rodriguez, who has obviously gone on to have a lot of success and general fame because of Fast and Furious franchise and being in the Resident Evil movies. And now she's in Avatar movies. Yeah.
But we were talking quickly off air before we started that one thing you sort of said that resonated with me, because I did watch this about a week and a half ago because somebody works in retail and couldn't record last week. So I got I had to sort of catch up on a bit. This film really feels like a film from the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah, it does.
It's like very rarely do you see, I think, a film, or maybe it happens a lot, but I've only just started to notice that films from that age, that time, really are starting to show some age, and they're really starting to feel like they're from a different era. There are standard ones. If you see like, the teen films like the American Pies of a time, stuff, the haircuts, the fashion, the music kind of really stand out, make it stand out as a 90s film or an early 2000s film. Like one of your favorites from Justin to Kelly, a classic if there ever was one. This one is not so much the music and the fashion though. That's there. But it just, I don't know, the way it's shot, the tropes, it screams, I'm an indie film from 1999.
Yeah, it's like there's moments where they'll be filming a scene and it just for a split second loses focus and comes back again. It's like, yep, they're working on a budget, and they were really working on a budget. This is kind of this project had been banned. Let's just stop. We've done it again. People might not know what this movie's about.
Wow, we should probably talk about what the film's about. Diana, without her father knowing it, trains as a boxer and achieves impressive success, blazing new trails for female boxers. Diana is played by a debuting Michelle Rodriguez in her first feature film performance. It is directed by Karen Kusama, who's hardly a household name, but has done some interesting stuff since she did the Aeon Flux film and a lot of TV in the ensuing years. Billions, Halt and Catch Fire, The Outsider, which is a great show, Man in the High Castle. So she's kicking around. If she's not exactly Jennifer's Body, there's a film that no one talks about anymore.
Oh shit! Yeah, I hated that fucking movie.
I
hate Diablo Cody as a writer. I really do. I really don't like her.
The only actor I think you'll recognize in this film, apart from Michelle Rodriguez, is the character of Sandro Guzman, her father, played by Paul Calderon. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I'll apologize in advance. He is that guy who's in that thing. I was looking at his film credits here. I'm like, he was the guy. He was in Pulp Fiction for about 10 seconds.
I'm looking at his. Yeah, he's been in everything.
He opens the door and he goes, "Yeah, this is my name is Paul, and this is Twin Y'all." So I haven't seen that film dozens of times. He's had a lot of credits. You'll be like, oh, that guy. Yep, I've seen him in stuff. But otherwise, it's all about Michelle, and it's Michelle's film.
100%. 100%. This is very much the birthplace of Michelle Rodriguez in her career. Not just this is her debut. This is her breakout role. This absolutely captures pretty much every role that she's ever had, where she is physically strong, usually angry, dominant, powerful woman. And she always, to the credit of the production of this movie, they purposely wanted to have a Latina. Because it's a different spin on, or it's a different interesting social focus. And she always comes across in all of her movies, every single one, she always is, it feels like she's very proud of her own heritage. And so there's so much about every character that has been in the public eye that she's been in this movie. Everything kind of stems from this role, I feel.
It really does set a tone for her career. And I think what prompted the idea to do this film was she, of course, was in Widows, our last Chain film. And I think maybe we both felt like she showed a little bit of vulnerability in that role, which we do not see from Michelle. And what made me think of it is I think she has become a bit of a one-trick pony. She's a very, very fine actress who does what she knows very well, but I don't think she steps outside that comfort zone very often. And that's, she makes a shit ton of money, I'm sure, from those Fast and Furious movies, so why would you? But it would be nice to see her step outside that comfort zone. And I feel like this is the film that I think really I come back to again and again, and I see her performance in his film is almost a virtuoso performance. Like this film, like we said, it popped up on the radar because it was an indie darling, had all that festival buzz. But if it didn't star Michelle Rodriguez, if it starred a lesser actress, it just would. I think it would have disappeared without a ripple. Yeah, it's all about Michelle, and I think she shows quite a bit in this role. I mean, she is playing a very stereotypical Michelle character in the sense she's sort of. We meet her at the start. She's angry. She's disenfranchised. She's incredibly cynical about her life and everybody in it. She has, I would argue, very low self-esteem, I think. And her natural instinct is to solve all problems by using her fists. And she's almost expelled from school from beating the shit out of a girl who insults her friend. And, she sort of stumbles across this idea of taking up boxing up through her brother, who is reluctantly attending boxing classes at a local gym. She goes to pick him up. And you can almost get a feel from that first one. She's almost intoxicated by what's going on around her in this gym. It's almost like she's stumbled into something she can actually believe in. And that sort of grows over time as she really starts to find herself and her feet in this sport, if you can call boxing a sport.
Well, at that point, but especially for women in the sport of boxing, there's very few, and so it is the genesis of female boxing, really, in more popular culture, I guess.
It's interesting. I don't think female boxing. I wonder if it's really come as far as we might have hoped it had in 20 years. I think boxing. I'm by no means a boxing aficionado. I feel like it's gone backwards in the last 20 years in terms of prestige. In the sense you've got, I don't know if you saw, but Jake Paul, a YouTuber, is fighting some very famous boxer. I think, early next couple of months, and
it seems like when I think of physical sports and females, I instantly go to UFC. And that's where you think about Ronda Rousey and some of the other people who have kind of broken through the social zeitgeist and just people know about them. Whereas I don't think I could name a female boxer.
I know Muhammad Ali's daughter or granddaughter was a boxer for a while. And I remember she made some headlines for a bit because, she was Ali's daughter or granddaughter. I'm not probably doing granddaughter at that point. But other than that, you're right. I don't think there've been any, I don't feel, there's a couple of AFLW players in Australia who have actually done their bit in boxing as well, which is an interesting crossover of sports. But yeah, it doesn't feel, I feel like boxing as a whole has significantly less cachet than it did. It feels like it's more of a novelty thing in a way. Maybe it's gone more towards the UFC, but you're right. UFC has really broken that down. Whereas I remember when UFC came to Melbourne, Ronda Rousey's fight, I think, was the main event. She is still a household name. I don't know anything about UFC. I don't know any of the other fighters, except I still know Ronda. And likewise, I think that's transitioned, whether it's a sport or not, into professional wrestling as well. Even if you go back 10 years and look at what female professional wrestling was.
Bra and panty matches.
Bra and panty matches, evening gown matches were a thing. Were basically titillation. Whereas a couple of years ago, they headlined WrestleMania with Ronda Rousey and a couple others, Charlotte Flair and what's her name? The other one? Becky Lynch. So, I know, yes, it's not real. It's not really a sport. It's scripted. But in 10 years, they've gone from bra and panty matches to headlining the biggest the biggest event in professional wrestling, and arguably one of the biggest events in professional athletic sport type things in the world.
Yeah.
And whereas it's almost their main attraction at times. It's better than the men. So that was what I was thinking while I was watching this. It would have been an interesting time for a character like Diana to have entered that world. And maybe she would have ended up somewhere like UFC, or I think she would have done well in the UFC because she didn't take any shit. But you're right. Like, it certainly was. It's interesting to see that attitude now, 20 years later, like, girls boxing. What's the world come to? It's the most crazy thing in the world that a girl wants to box. Like I said, I don't think female boxing's come that far, but I think it would be totally different now. I don't think it'd be any question of like, oh, you want to be a boxer? Maybe she wants to fight in UFC. Cool, whatever. But it would be completely run of the mill stuff today.
Yeah.
What did you make of her relationship with her family? I felt like that was potentially also one of the really strong parts of his film.
I really loved it because it was not your typical kind of familial relationship that you would get in this kind of movie, in an indie movie. And the way that the relationships evolve over time, her relationship with her brother and the very, very broken relationship she has with her father, really played well. And again, I still maintain that the father and brother, who was they were Paul Calderon and Ray Santiago. They do admirable for what they're given, but it's always Michelle's show. Every single scene she's in, she is the power on the screen, physically, emotionally, mentally. She's always there, bringing it, and layering so much on. Like, she's just sitting down talking with her brother. It's just a short scene where he's kind of saying, "Oh, who's this new guy? First comes love, then comes marriage," and just the way that she shrugs it off. It's like, it's not like that, man. And she layers so much more into her use of pauses and her not making eye contact with him and things like that. It's so telling. And then compare that to scenes where she's beating the shit out of her dad.
I think it's the strongest scene in the film for me. And at the start of the film, she's really terrorized by her father, who refuses to allow her the money that he pays for his son's boxing classes. She asks for a similar amount as an allowance, which he also wants to use on boxing classes. He says no.
Yeah.
And he really have a really, as you sort of said, broken relationship. But you really feel like he terrorizes the two of them. But I feel like it's a really wonderful almost signpost on her journey to believing in herself and some self-confidence, when after a while of doing her boxing lessons, she actually literally overpowers and beats the shit out of him a little bit in the kitchen, and actually holds him down. And you said, "You're mine now." And again, to say, I feel like Paul Calderon was really strong in this role for a guy who's pretty well known. There was a real look of fear and terror on his face, which it was a nice cathartic scene, because it's probably not uncommon that there are men out there like that in the world, and fuck you if you're one of them. But that moment where the abuser realizes he has no power over
you have no power over me.
The giraffe moment, right? So we couldn't call it a giraffe moment. That sounds like a bad emo band. But yeah, that moment where he suddenly realizes his control has completely evaporated over his children, and they are stronger than him. And the fact that she's a girl probably really contributes to his humiliation as well. I love that scene. It was the one scene that I remembered from this film vividly 20 years later, even before I saw it again.
Yeah. For anyone who is curious and might kind of go, "Oh, is this like Rocky with girls?" No, absolutely not. This is a far more personal kind of young adult journey of awakening.
I think it's a lot grittier in that film, which is hard to believe, because Rocky was fairly gritty in its own way.
Yeah, especially the first one.
But this one feels more real. Like it feels. I think it's. I'll give credit to the film. Like I said, it does show its age a bit, and it does have some indie pretension in there.
Yeah.
But it does produce a world that feels lived in. That gym feels like it's 100 years old. You can feel almost how cold the wind would blow through the cracks in the windows and the doors.
Yeah.
And the crappy motivational signs handwritten on.
Just a lot of piece of cardboard. Yeah.
Kind of falling apart and stuff like that. And the old notice boards with like ancient notices on them. And, the place feels run down and dilapidated and depressing.
Yeah.
And it's just the kind of place you would expect to find in a neighborhood like that. Sean wants to know, why can't you donate? I don't know what I'm donating to, Sean. So
that's on Twitch. Because, Sean, we haven't set that up. But if you want to donate, I'll look into that for next episode. But appreciate the watch. Thanks, dude.
That is, there you go. I think you're asking us for money. I'm like, makes me think I have any. I mean, you've seen the show. You've seen what we do.
Can donate. We just choose not to.
We don't have any money. Please don't take my wallet.
But going back to that point of realism, I think the sets that they use for it are great, and they do very much feel lived in. And you kind of wonder, on this budget, they probably did just go to the local gym that was beaten up, but also the big difference between kind of style of storytelling, very telling in the trainers as well. So Jamie Tirelli, who plays Hector Soto, who's Michelle's trainer, he is a great character, and it's become quite a cliche, that type of curmudgeonly old guy who's just seen it all, and now he's just going to train one last
Meredith. Meredith,
exactly. And he was
actually
kind of a caricature, whereas Hector Soto is just this honest guy who's just training. He's been training for a long time, and he slowly he's not this kind of, he's not the only one who's sort of like, yeah, I'm going to train this girl. I see something in her. So I'm like, sure, I'm probably not going to be able to train you.
I'll take the money. I'll take your money. I don't really think you should, but
it's a very genuine character.
He's got a bit of an arc as well, and he sort of she gets quite a bit out of the training with him, but he gets something out of it as well. And like there is actually almost, I think it's very loosely there, but you could look a little deeper and almost feel like a father-daughter style relationship, a more healthy father-daughter style relationship started to form a little bit towards her. Maybe I'm going a little bit too deep there, but a more healthy version of one that she didn't have with her father between the two of them. He almost becomes the prime male role model in her life. And she doesn't have many. But yeah, I think that's the location work of this film is immaculate, and they've done very well to find the locations they have, and it really helps the film. I don't remember a whole lot about the music. I feel like that kind of helps. It didn't actually feel as dated as it might have had if it had, like the latest Limp Bizkit song during a training montage, and they're like rolling, where she's running up the steps somewhere.
That would have been so bad.
That would have been cool. Someone needs to do that. But yeah, I think it's a nice little film, and like it's interesting. You really did make me think of it. It was of its time, and I'm struggling though to really give you a concrete thing about it. It makes it of its time, but we don't see anymore, because I don't think we see films like this anymore.
Well, I think that kind of sports movies that I think generally this would probably be labeled under, just because of the driving force behind it of boxing. That's generally kind of become quite a positive cash cow. They seem to be quite successful overall. So you don't really get much in the way of indie movies doing sports movies anymore, because there's that opportunity, because it's that trial by fire, kind of like that difficulty, overcoming difficult barriers and boundaries and all of that sort of stuff, which is good Oscar bait, and it's got a lot of potential. So they kind of get whipped up into those B-rate movies and low A-grade movies where it'll get like angel sponsorship from George Clooney or Brad Pitt or something to bump it up into the $30 million, $40 million bracket. And suddenly it loses the rawness of an independent movie.
It becomes a film like Fighting with My Family.
Yeah.
Which the WWE funded, and hence it has The Rock and Nick Frost and people you recognize, and a little bit more of a budget. This film was made on $1 million. Yeah. So that's the smell of an oily rag. We haven't used that one in a while.
We need to get that on a t-shirt so we can say, it's the t-shirt.
Hello to Mel, who's watching on Twitch. Thank you for tuning in for a little while. We are talking about Girlfight, the 2000 Michelle Rodriguez film. How did you, I was glad to have seen it again. I think it did reinforce for me, as I sort of said from the start, I think Michelle Rodriguez is an actress with a great deal more capacity and range than we see from her on a regular basis. I would love to see Michelle Rodriguez doing Shakespeare.
Okay. What Shakespeare?
Lady Macbeth.
That's not bad. You know what I would want? They did a kind of gender bend for the role of Prospero in I think it was like 2014, 2015 film version of The Tempest, where they got Helen Mirren to play Prospero. I think she could be a fucking cool kind of like hard as nails, beaten up, wizard like that. I think she'd be pretty cool in that. I think.
Okay, I just had like a really terrible idea that I think absolutely should happen.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the post-Trump age of filmmaking. Just like that Bob Dylan film they did before for women, we have to do a Trump film where we get 15 different actresses all to play Trump at different stages of his presidency. And I think Michelle Rodriguez needs to be the person who goes up the elevator and gives a speech about Mexicans not sending us their best.
That is hilarious.
That's a free idea. I want to see it happen.
Muggle Mel just wrote in saying typecast as the tough girl in all of her movies. That is absolutely true. And while she does that really, really well, I think that, you know what? I'm surprised that she hasn't done any voice acting work because her voice is identifiable, for one thing. She has got a recognizable voice and she knows how to use her voice. It's on display in Girlfight, like I talked about before. She knows how to use silence and pauses and accentuate specific words and things like that. She would be really interesting.
Got a couple. She did Call of Duty Black Ops 2. She did some voice work in the Smurfs. Oh my god!
Yeah, I'm not counting that. That's not a movie.
Fast and Furious Crossroads, which apparently is revoltingly terrible game.
Yeah,
people play that. But yeah, no, I think she did Halo 2 and Driver and True Crime Streets of LA. So she's
doing video game voicing, but I'm thinking,
you mean like cartoons and stuff?
Yeah, like she appears in a Pixar movie or DreamWorks or something like that. I feel like because she has definitely got that ability to be fun and bubbly with her voice. She can be really serious. I would love to see her take on a villain role in an animated movie.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'd be down with that. I forgot she was in Alita as well. Look,
Sure.
I mean,
Oh yes,
I guess it's a bit of a golden handcuff situation for her. Like, I can't imagine how much she gets paid for Fast and Furious now because those movies make $1 squillion every one of them, like $1 billion. These are $1 billion films, the Fast and Furious films. Whether I like them or not, they make a lot of money. And I imagine she doesn't. I don't know if they work together as a cast, like the Friends cast and the Seinfeld cast were like, no, we work together, and they all got a shit ton of money per episode.
Yeah,
I don't know if the stars of those films work together, but I have to imagine she's going to be getting millions and millions per film. Probably upwards. You have to think if they're grossing $1 billion, she'd have to be getting over 10 million a film or something. I don't know what.
Surely. She's one of the integral family members of the franchise.
You can't. I mean, I know you've got Vin and her kind of define the series, really. I mean,
they do now. Yeah,
Rock kind of does a little bit, but he's more of a Johnny Come Lately.
Yeah.
So I get that it must be very tempting to just go. You work for 6 weeks a year, doing the new Fast and Furious film, drive some cars, and then go live on your private island for a while. I don't know. She doesn't really need to do much else.
Yeah.
But I would love it if she did. I'm just like, it's a little bit like The Rock. I feel like The Rock's got more range when we see in his films. At least he does comedies. Michelle really doesn't do that either.
No. It feels like she takes herself very serious, but in this one lane.
Anyway, but she did do Machete Kills. Props to her for that. I am very curious to see where you're taking us next. It's your turn for, I think, 2 weeks now because I took us to Widows and I took her to Girlfight.
Mel just popped in saying apparently she got 30 million for the last one, apparently. So,
good luck to her, right? I mean, she's a key part of it.
Yeah,
they're making all the money.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely. She earns it for sure in all of her movies. She does a lot of her own stunt work from what I understand. She puts in the effort. She shows up. She always, you can always see her working hard. So, yeah. So I am going on for the Chain movie. We are following Jamie Tirelli, who played the Hector, the trainer. We are going to be going to the 1993 classic movie now, I think it's fair to say, Carlito's Way.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Now, I haven't actually seen Carlito's Way, so I figured it's a great opportunity for me to tick off one of the iconic Al Pacino movies. And going from there, we've got a lot of possibilities to go for. Al Pacino, and John Leguizamo,
Louis Guzman for the win. He'll take us to Boogie
Nights. Viggo Mortensen, I didn't even realize was in there.
And this is not mentioned. In fact, it's directed by a bloke named Brian De Palma.
Never done anything.
Never did anything else. Did a couple other films, Carrie, The Untouchables, Blowout, Scarface. Scarface, no one ever heard of that one. It'll be a treat.
Yeah,
it's a good one as well.
Yeah, so that's where we're going to be going next week, and I'm excited to see it for the very first time.
And it's Sean Penn in there. It's some of his best work as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just checking now to see where we can see this film because
it is not apparently on streaming, but it is available to rent and buy
on your usual Google's places and fetches,
Apple
TVs and YouTube places. Yeah. Very good, very good. So we can actually watch this film legally for a change, which is what we do like to do.
And for those who do not know, such as myself, Carlito's Way is a Puerto Rican former convict just released from prison pledges to stay away from drugs and violence despite the pressure around him and lead on to a better life outside of NYC.
It's a great film. It's Al Pacino. Probably, I'd say Eddie's peak.
I mean, right before he became a cliche of going, "What are you at?"
Yeah, that's it. She's got a great ass. Shall we move on?
Let's move
on. And Carlito's Way. We've got stuff we've actually both watched, as we said at the start of the show, and we can actually have a two-way conversation.
Should we go to Soul or Wonder Woman?
Let's take the big new release of the last few weeks, and I imagine you, like me, got to go to a cinema of some form. A new release movie. What a treat! More Wonder Woman 1984.
Wonder Woman 1984. So this is the follow-up to Wonder Woman, which introduced us to a fully realized version of Wonder Woman, which we had been teased at in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and Justice League, and this was her first standalone movie, directed by Patty Jenkins and starring Gal Gadot. That was a very nice little origin story for Wonder Woman with Chris Pine in there as the love interest slash co-male lead of Steve Trevors. It had David Thewlis and a cornucopia of quintessential British actors because it was set during World War I. So Wonder Woman 84 picks up 1984. And it's a really weird one.
It's an odd little film. I just like to start out because what I'm going to talk about in the next little while makes it sound... I'm going to have a lot of negative things to say about this film. But that's to say, I didn't hate this film.
Mm-hmm.
I would not put... I've seen people out there saying it's the worst DC film ever, which I think is really, really off point. I mean, it's
clearly they've not watched Suicide Squad.
They've not seen Suicide Squad. It's nowhere near as bad as that. For me, it's nowhere near as bad as Dawn of Justice, which we disagree on this, but I hated it. It's not as bad as Justice League. It's probably on a par, well, maybe not as good as Aquaman, I think. It's not the bottom of the pile, but it's in the bottom half.
It's dangerously middling.
It's in the conversation, I guess. But I thought it was okay, mostly okay.
So before we go any further, I think the only plot description on IMDb kind of sums it up perfectly in one of its real flaws, and it just says. This was by Anonymous, apparently. Rewind to the 1980s as Wonder Woman's next big screen adventure finds her facing two all-new foes, Max Lord and the Cheetah. And that kind of sums it up, because what's it about?
I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, it has a number of problems here, okay? One, Why is it set in 1984? Muggle Mel fell asleep during Aquaman at the cinema. Look, it actually popped up in my Facebook memories this morning of me going, Aquaman was silly, but it was okay. Mm-hmm. So I think it was kind of about where we landed on the show. Was it too long? It was kind of silly, but somehow they held it together.
Yeah, they were spinning a lot of plates, but none of them completely died and ruined everything. Yeah,
I would like to say, though, speaking of Mel came and saw Birds of Prey with me last year in about January or February. It wasn't as bad as that film, Mel. So it's not as bad as Birds of Prey either. That's below this film as well. You sort of mentioned in the first thing it sort of says there, this flashback to 1980s. Why is it set in the 80s?
Yeah,
it seems to play absolutely no role in the story. It has no bearing on the story. No. It's just so they can have some funky outfits.
Yeah, and for me, especially with the opening action sequence being set in the mall, it kind of felt like it was. They chose 1984 because it was a slight byproduct of the success of Stranger Things, and it's that period setting. It's like, okay, sure, but it didn't need to be 1984.
Why, though? I mean, probably also worth mentioning, this film has been sitting on the shelf for probably about a year. It was originally going to be released in the back end of 2019. Yeah. Then they decided to kick it forward to June, I think, so that not because there was a problem necessarily, depending who you ask, not necessarily a problem for film, but to potentially get a bigger box office in summer. Yeah. And then obviously the unknown virus of unknown origin sort of shut that down. So it's gone for a 2 or 3 release dates. So that Stranger Things thing might have made sense in 2019, but it sure is in 2021.
Yeah, but story-wise, there's no point. And I worked out what movie this reminded me of in the way that there is not really an overarching story, but it's just about character conflict on different levels. There's the physical and then there's the emotional side. And it was Christopher Reeve's Superman 2.
Yeah, I mean, there was some of that there. I mean, to get a little bit, let's get a little bit of a plot. A little bit of plot, and we can look back around to that because what you say does make sense. Essentially, we have Diana working at the Smithsonian in the 80s. Mm-hmm. She meets one of her co-workers who was played by Kristen Wiig, who was playing Kristen Wiig, doing Kristen Wiig. Yeah. And in the story pops the character of Max Lord, who is like think like a Jordan Belfort type character. You know, he does TV commercials about get rich stuff, and he is aware of an artifact currently in the possession of Kristen Wiig, which I don't know what's the wish stone or something. And basically, if you touch, it's like the monkey's paw parable. You know, if you touch the stone and make a wish, it will grant your wish. But in doing so, it will take your most valued possession back off you. It is never explained, by the way, exactly how Max knows that she has this stone, where it is, what it is, how it exists.
No, that is illustrated throughout it because the stone was seized because of the robbery, and it had Maxwell Lord's thing there. He had been researching it, and the intonated connection that they never actually specify is that he hired these guys or was buying this, and it got embroiled into that. Why he would know that it had been taken by the FBI to the Smithsonian to be identified, which doesn't really make much sense as to, I don't know if the FBI would really do something like that. It's
I think you're holding in evidence for quite some time to track those guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wants to get this off Kristen Wiig so he can become. He's not very successful. He's in a lot of debt. His business is failing. He basically charms his way into Kristen Wiig's office, steals the stone, and is able to start making wishes. Along the way, both Kristen Wiig and Diana make wishes without realizing exactly what they're doing. But the stone actually works. Kristen Wiig's being, I want to be more like Diana, which includes walking in high heels.
And the powers of Wonder Woman, kind of.
Kind of. And Diana wishes for Steve Trevor to come back. And in doing so, her most valuable possession starts to sort of creep away, being her superpowers. So throughout this film, we have a Wonder Woman who is progressively becoming less powerful. Why exactly the Stone's doing it over a period of time, don't know.
Because reasons.
There's a script needed it too. So that's a bit of background to say that's kind of our plot from here, and Max Lord becomes more powerful as Diana is losing her powers, and as Kristen is discovering, Barbara, aka Kristen Wiig, aka Cheetah, is starting to discover her powers and become a threat to the world and Diana. So as my illustrious co-host sort of noted, this does feed into that Superman 2 territory where Clark Kent gives up his powers so he can be with Lois Lane.
Yep.
Except that film was really good.
Yes.
Like, really fucking good.
Yeah.
And they actually use that in an interesting way, and they don't here.
This does not go at all in the direction. They choose a weird way of getting Chris Pine back into this. It's because it's not actually Steve Trevor's who comes back. It's his soul.
Occupies the body of a random guy.
Yeah, of a random dude, but Diana only sees him, whereas I guess everyone else sees this other guy. And you think
was a strange choice.
Yeah, that was a really, really weird choice, because they have brought back Steve Trevor's through time, because he is the primary love interest, or the quintessential love interest of Wonder Woman in the comics. And yes, he was in World War I, and suddenly he's in modern day. There's interesting story to tell there, but you would need more than one movie to truly get into that and tell it well. But I felt like that was a kind of a weird, creepy thing to do, and for her to so willingly kind of go, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm okay to be entirely deluded and not
shag a random dude.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck to him.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I sometimes have this thing. I've talked before in the show about my friend Del, who is a scientist, who, if something doesn't make scientific sense in a movie, he's out. Doesn't matter how good the film is. He's completely withdrawn from the film. And I'm starting to develop these tendencies where if something happens in a story and it doesn't make sense, I just can't get it out of my head. And I'm like, who's to say he doesn't have a family?
Yeah.
Who's to say he doesn't have a job? What about what if he's supposed to be having drinks with friends that night? Instead, he's shagging Gal Gadot. I mean, like, hey, lucky him. But what if he's gay? Like, are his family, are people going to be looking for him? What's going on?
Because it seems like Steve Trevor's takes over his body for quite a while, and then at the end of the movie, we meet this guy again, and maybe I'm reading myself wrong here, but if I lost days of time and suddenly found myself in the middle of a riot when nuclear missiles had just gone off, I'd have a few questions, and I'd probably be in therapy every day to try and work out what the fuck happened.
There's an episode of X-Files in that. He probably became like a UFO conspiracy theorist. I lost time. I lost a week.
I've got this weird mark here. It's slowly fading now. It's like, yes.
I was abducted by a weird, gorgeous aliens. Had their way with me. But yeah, and it's a strange one. What they dealt with him was very odd, and that kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
The other part that really bothered me, I guess, to cut ahead in the story a little bit, if you, I guess from here, you're going to probably start to get into some spoiler territory, I guess.
Yes.
So if you haven't seen it yet, and we probably should have done this at the start. If you haven't seen it yet and you want to see it, maybe skip ahead 20 minutes. We'll probably be done by then. We're probably, or you can just keep listening and we'll save you the trouble. Yeah. One of Max's early schemes is to basically bankrupt one of his creditors and basically take control of a lot of the United States' oil reserves. But next, he goes to Egypt to try and convince a sheikh there to basically hand over his oil reserves to him. So Diana and Steve decide to follow him to Egypt. And how they do this, was the second thing that really pulled me out of this film and really bothered me for the rest of it. They take a jet to Egypt, which doesn't sound ridiculous on the surface, except that to find the jet, Diana takes him out the back of the Smithsonian Institute, where they have fully prepped and fueled jets. It's available for anybody if they want to borrow one for the weekend, apparently. Like, I'll be fair and say I haven't been to the Smithsonian, but I'm kind of betting they don't have fully fueled and active jets just hanging around the place.
Yeah, no.
Second part is Steve's like, oh my God, I would love to fly one of these. And he gets in and does that. I mean,
yeah, like, a crack pilot from World War One gonna be a wee bit lost at sea in a modern jet.
Fighter jet, which they look very complicated. There are lots of dials, but he gets in. He's like, "Oh, that thing was switched there. Must turn it on." And bada bing, bada.
They didn't even try to go for the fish out of water joke of, so like, okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay, nothing like that. They just played it straight.
Oh, of course he's a pilot. Pilots are pilots, right? Aviation hasn't changed in the preceding 70 years, has it? I mean, it's just the same. But then they're getting tracked by radar, which Diana conveniently forgot about. And she goes, oh, I forgot. I know how to turn this plane invisible. Let me just do that. Blah, it's done. Which didn't bother me. I mean, she's a superhero. She can do superhero shit. But the worst part was they managed to fly this jet from Washington, D.C., to Egypt. That's a really
tank of fuel.
I mean, I was speaking to somebody you know very well the other night, and her response was, well, maybe they refueled somewhere. And I'm like, yeah, maybe.
Pull into a United Stations, so like, fill her up, please. Clean the windscreen for me.
And this is it. I was actually trying to do the sums in my head going, I feel like it's a really, really long way to Egypt from Washington, D.C. And I feel like the range on a fighter jet's not going to be anywhere near enough. And as soon as I got to my car, got out, the movie was over, I was Googling.
If they had that kind of flight distance, and because you don't see them refuel either. And, you know, the jet's stolen from the US government, so they're probably not going to be able to land anywhere normal. So if jets had that much fuel capacity, they would not need aircraft carriers.
Yeah, well, just for the record, it's about double the longest range of any fighter jet in history. They fly from Washington, D.C. to Egypt. It's a long, long, long way in one little fighter jet. And I'm sorry, maybe you think I'm being picky here, but this is the kind of thing that gets me thinking. If the film does something that makes no sense, it kind of pulls me out of the whole film and go, well, hang on a second, how can he fly that? Hang on a second, how can that jet fly to Egypt?
That's
and you get to go, you know, I'm just supposed to buy that. I don't.
That's the thing. In the same movie, they introduced the invisible jet, which is kind of one of those cheesy, iconic elements of the Wonder Woman character. But they also got her flying. And it's like, okay, you've introduced this, and now it's like, yeah, she doesn't need that anymore. It's like, okay. What? Come on. They're just shooting themselves in the foot, and they bundled the first one, and I think they kind of realized it's like, you know what? It's not going to sit great, so we'll put in that dialogue that Steve Trevors has about, it's just about feeling the wind. It's like, you're in a fucking cockpit. You are not feeling the wind. Sorry, and it is entirely different to the kind of planes that you are flying. It is going to feel entirely different. It is not the fucking same.
If you're feeling the wind, you're doing it wrong. So it's just like I can't put stuff in there and go, it's a superhero film. That doesn't need to make sense. Yeah. The fight scene in Egypt is okay. We learned a little bit more about Wonder Woman's Diana starting to lose her powers a little bit. That's where it really starts to become obvious. And it's kind of ridiculous in parts, but it's a superhero fight scene is what it is. Then we sort of get the second part of this, which is how do they get back to the United States for the MacGuffin scene with the ancient Mayan book? They just transport. All of a sudden, they're back in the United States. No explanation about how they...
And they do it super quick because she She makes a phone call to Kristen Wiig's character, and then the next scene is like, oh, we're making our way back now. So like, it's not just round the corner. It's really not.
It really isn't. It's a long way. I sort of gave everyone an idea. It is a 12-hour flight time between Cairo and Washington D.C. Now, obviously, we didn't say which part of Egypt they were in. They could have been in another bit. But it looked like a big city, so I'm guessing it was probably Cairo. Anyway, maybe I focused too much on this, and no one talks about it in the film. About how in any of the reviews they never talk about the fact that the plane can't go that far, and I'm like, I'm sorry, it really bothered me. Yeah. And then we get into probably this is the really rough part. The stuff we talked about right now is probably the strongest part of the film.
Yeah,
it gets worse. The third act is a shocker.
Yeah, and the villains of Maxwell Lord and Cheetah in the comics are extraordinary. There's it was, I think it was Grant Morrison's run. I think it was Grant Morrison. There was like in the late 80s, early 90s, there was kind of a reboot of Wonder Woman, and the story of Wonder Woman and Cheetah being the main villain. It was awesome. And it kind of goes into reasons why they're consistently kind of clashing, and it was this well thought out story and conflict of characters, interesting characters, why they were butting heads, why they were considering each other the villain to their own hero. It was brilliant. And yet in this, it's sort of like, yeah, so she gets the powers of Wonder Woman because she says, I want to be just like Diana. It's like, okay, fair enough. She gets strength, speed, all of that sort of stuff. And then she morphs into a cheetah because she makes a second wish saying, I want to be an apex predator. When someone says apex predator to you, you generally don't think cheetah.
You think lions, tigers, bears, oh my.
You don't think cheetah.
No, I mean, yeah.
So why did she become a cheetah?
It made a bit more sense if, like, you know, she's like in the plane and they're flying and there's a magazine, maybe a National Geographic magazine next to her, and there's a cheetah on the cover.
Yeah.
And she's looking around going, I want to kill her. I want to be an apex predator.
Yeah. Oh, like they're so majestic. Anything like that.
And she points to the cheetah on the cover of a magazine. But they didn't, yeah.
That's all they needed.
And that's where we come into one of the other weaker points of the film. The CGI is pretty bad.
It had been sitting on the shelf. I can't believe that they didn't go back to it and go, okay, let's tweak this. And I remember there was dialogue online before the initial, the original release date. They're saying, oh yeah, we're going back, and the reason why we haven't shown the full cheetah is because we want it to be good. We want people to be impressed by it, which very much slaps off. Yeah, everyone was pissed off when they saw the Ivanhoe looking Apocalypse from X-Men Apocalypse, and every single time the CGI has not been finished for a trailer and they rushed it out anyway. Understandable why they'd hold that back in trailers, but they had an extra year, and that's the best they got.
And the little bit of context, Diana flies to an island where she's going to take on Max Lord and you know, take down his evil plan to give a wish to everyone in the world and get lots of power. And Cheetah has sort of aligned herself with Max Lord, and there's a fight scene between Diana or Wonder Woman and Cheetah outside as she arrives on this island to try and defeat Max Lord. And I was wondering if it was me because I saw this at the drive-in. Not always, dark, and especially with some idiot shooting his lights into my eyes. So, like, maybe it was just me and I wasn't seeing it very well. But no, everyone has said the same thing. The scene's set in darkness.
Yeah,
it's very difficult to see what's going on. And the only explanation that seems to be doing the rounds as to why you would host that scene in darkness is to cover up the shitty CGI. And, what you can see, it looks very average. It looks like, lots of gags about Cheetah looking like a leftover special effect from Cats.
Yeah. It's not that bad, but it's still,
we may be getting a butthole release soon. You never know.
Release the butthole.
You make an excellent point. Is this film's been sitting around for a while? Word on the street is early test screenings weren't positive. They had to do reshoots. Why would you not completely? You had a year to redo. You could do this scene from scratch.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know about special effects, but surely you can do one CGI scene.
Yeah.
Or clean it up somehow. But it looked horrible. That was like the worst scene in the film, CGI was.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And it was like maybe they were trying to put that whole thing of the predator knows how to use the shadows. It's like that's in their native environment where the color of their spots and fur blends into the tall grass and surroundings, not a tropical island and not necessarily at night. And they didn't really do anything with that. And the initial inciting incident of why Cheetah starts fighting Wonder Woman was actually pretty good. It's a solid reason. I don't want to give up this new power that I've got. So I can't follow your lead here because I don't want to give this up. That's a reason to have an argument, a little bit of fisticuffs. Okay. And then it's like, okay, so what? Why do you feel the need to go further? And why are you still fighting when you're happy with the rest of the world? Everything in the world being destroyed? There are literally hundreds of nukes being just wished into existence and flying. Come on, they don't even try to have some form of conversation, a debate or interest or intrigue about it. This is where I come back to my Superman 2 analogy, the fight scene in the
Fortress of Solitude.
Yes, and it's like the differences of Zod and Superman, and even better. Which one is it? Superman 3, where he wishes away his powers, and then you've got that iconic scene in the diner where Clark Kent gets beaten up.
That's
and then
Superman 2 as well.
Yeah, so it's that, but it just didn't work here.
If you're right, they've really drawn on some tropes here. I mean, that well, she had her powers back by that point in time. So,
and she had the stupid armor. And
at no point did she actually have her powers gone completely.
No.
That would have been an interesting story. Would have been Diana as a mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have gone, we're just doing Superman 2. But hey, I always say that if you're going to rip somebody off, rip off the best. And Dick Donner's Superman 2 is an acknowledged masterpiece.
Yeah.
Of comic book cinema. So you're going to rip it off, do a good one. And that would have been an interesting angle. Is like, how is Diana going to tackle this foe without her power? She's going to have to use her smarts and her her moral compass to some degree, maybe. But yeah, it just kind of like went in. You got to go in, you got to go all in. And you sort of went half in and go, oh, she can bleed now, and she's not quite as strong as she was.
Yeah,
but she's got the lasso of truth, and that does everything.
Yep.
And we're sort of talking superhero tropes. Just to take a step back onto Kristen Wiig's character, she's basically a half-assed Michelle Pfeiffer from Superman Returns. I mean, how many times have we seen this character before? Yeah. And look, that's not Kristen Wiig's fault. I thought she did what she could with the material. I think the takeaway here, without going into spoiling the entire end, but here's a hint: she wins. I think the main problem with this film is the writing. It's really badly written.
Yeah, it feels hackneyed and tropey and come together. And no disrespect to the work that Kristen Wiig does in it, or even Gal Gadot or Chris Pine, and particularly Pedro Pascal breathes as much. He tries to Frankenstein monster all of the words that he has been told to.
I was fine. I thought he did what he did well. I mean, I've heard
he did great, and it was a really interesting take on the Maxwell Lord character, because the Maxwell Lord character is not that.
No, I think there was talk that he was inspired by Trump, which I didn't see at all in this. So he's like, he's almost a sympathetic character, really. He's not entirely awful. I mean, his motives are awful and his methods are awful, but he has redeeming character. And so I didn't get the Trump thing at all. Yeah. Kind of reminded me more of a dollar store Lex Luthor.
Yeah, kind of like a guy inspired by Lex Luthor, but didn't have the brains, didn't have the money, and was trying to kind of cheat and bullshit his way to the same levels of success. But that's not the Maxwell Lord character. There's a lot more going on with Maxwell Lord that's actually quite interesting, and he's had some interesting interactions with Wonder Woman as well. Every single story in this is about a personal one. This is, we're given the basically the Olympic Games of Themyscira at the start with a very young Diana Prince, and she cheats to nearly win and gets stopped, and there's the life lesson of the truth will out, blah blah blah.
She just never win.
Yeah, and Kristen Wiig, her personal journey of wanting to be more than what she currently is. Pedro Pascal not wanting to be a loser. Those are all actually good nuggets to start a story. None of them come together. None of them really feel fulfilled or viable or bookended in any comfortable way. There's nothing left over. So like, okay, so this was just another episode in the life of Wonder Woman. Okay, she's learned a lesson. Next week on Wonder Woman.
The other point here is that this film completely undermines the law that we set up previously in Justice League, that the world doesn't know Wonder Woman. That Wonder Woman's basically been under the radar since.
But she uses her tiara to break all the cameras, so it's fine.
It's fine. And like the fact that she would have been on TV fighting things and saving the world.
No one's got memory like that, Travis.
I think it's like, I mean, the first one wasn't written by Patty Jenkins. It was directed by Patty Jenkins. Yes. I believe the first one was written by Zack Snyder, as well as Alan Heinberg, Zack Snyder, and 3 more credits. Jason Fuchs, and of course the people who actually created the character. Obviously, Zack didn't get near this one. This one, I think, is written by Patty herself. And Patty doesn't have a great history as a writer. Not to say she's not a fine director. She did well in the first one. So Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns, who didn't write the first one. I have criticized Zack Snyder a lot for some of his stuff in the last 10 years, but I think it's fair to say he's a better writer than Patty is, because this film, and this isn't even touching on a number of other things that really bother me, like the male characters in this film all being like, "Hey, baby, baby, come sleep with me, baby."
The only redeeming male character is Steve Trevor's, and the
random handsome guy at the end.
Yeah, and the most sympathetic one is kind of Maxwell Lord, which would have been a really interesting stance to have for your main villain if you had decided to go all in on him being a villain and not make it about a fucking wish. And I'm sorry, I hate fucking movies like this. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time was a supreme guilty party in this, where it's like, the whole movie, the last major thing that the main hero does wipes out everything that we just saw. It makes it entirely pointless. This, you think growing up, Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent, they probably have recollection of, you remember that fucking crazy moment where we all nearly died from suddenly appearing nuclear missiles in the Holocaust and everyone was going crazy and there was the oil thing? Never mentioned. No, not at all. And then to have them all just disappear in the beautiful confetti. Stop using that as a get out of jail free card, people. Have repercussions. Don't be offended.
And it sort of leads into now, are we still in the DCEU? Does it still exist?
No one knows.
We're getting Justice League Snyder Cut sometime soon, so maybe we're going to have 3 Batman films this year, I've heard, or 3 different Batmans at least. Is Aquaman in the DCEU?
No one.
I know Marvel aren't always perfect, but at least they have consistency.
Yes.
Throughout that, there's somebody like George with fucking post-it notes on a wall with a timeline going, nah, you can't make it in 1984 because we already said nobody knew who the fuck she was, and that would completely undermine everything that happened in Justice League. You can't have your funky 80s outfits. Set it in the present day. This film could have been set in the present day, and that would have been fine.
Absolutely. This could have easily been set post Justice League.
Easily.
There is no narrative reason why it is 1984, because it doesn't go into the reasons why she entered the world in World War I, and then no one had heard about her up until Dawn of Justice. If it had filled in something about that, or reasons why she chose to disappear and purposely kind of delete herself from the timeline or anything like that, if it had gone into that, yes, there would have been a reason to have it set in the past. It doesn't. So, okay.
I think that ties a bow on it, because that's kind of where we started. This is why it's set in 1984. It didn't need to be. There are a lot of very odd choices in this film, and it's a deeply unsuccessful film as a result. It's not awful. I mean, it's not reprehensibly bad. And I think the reasons for that are Gal Gadot is a wonderful Wonder Woman again. She just lives the role.
Yeah. Everyone on screen does a great job with what they've got, but it just is not the sum of its parts.
They're just not given anything meaty to work with. And I go back to the thought that apparently the studio in the first Wonder Woman film didn't want the machine gun scene in it. They didn't like it, and they wanted it taken out.
Okay.
Potentially one of the most iconic scenes. I'd argue the most iconic scene in the film. I wonder if they maybe had their hands on this as well, because they don't make good choices. They don't make good choices at Warner Brothers. They make bad choices with each other. Yeah.
Now, we've talked about Wonder Woman 84 enough. Let's go on to the other new release that we both watched. Pixar's Soul.
Indeed. And this is the new film, as we said, from Pixar. It's landed on Disney Plus, I think, on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
A musician who has lost his passion for music is transported out of his body and must find his way back with the help of an infant soul learning about herself. So
I think that's wrong, because he doesn't lose his passion.
No, that's right. I don't recall him being out of passion. I mean, we meet the character of Joe.
He is very much passionate about jazz.
He is a middle school music teacher, but I guess an aspiring jazz musician outside of that, who one day is randomly given an opportunity to audition for a well-known jazz musician by a former student, and he absolutely fucking nails the audition and basically gets hired for the gig that night. In his excitement, whilst walking home, falls down a manhole cover, and is essentially dead-ish, or at least on life support,
brain dead.
But he's basically, as it sort of says, at that point he is transported out of his body to the great hereafter, or the afterlife. But because he was so excited to actually he finally got his opportunity to potentially chase his dream of being a jazz musician, he is determined to not give up on it and to somehow return to his body and his life. And in doing so, finds his way out of a great hereafter to the great before, where souls have their personalities sort of, personality traits added and defined before they go down
spark and inhabit a newborn
body and live a life. And that's a very high level overview of where we start. The voice work here, Jamie Foxx does voices Joe. Tina Fey voices 22, which is the infant soul who Joe is tasked with mentoring to find. I'm going to use the pronoun "it's" because it does have a female voice, but I would imagine a soul before it's born doesn't have a gender.
Well, they do explain that. It's like, oh, you sound like one, and 22 morphs into Joe, morphs into an old person, and things like that. So like that's fair. It's an interesting construct world where things are just whatever they want to be.
Other well-known people in here: Questlove voices Curly. Questlove being a musician in the Tribe Called Quest, and I think he's on one of the Tonight shows. He's the band leader on one of them. Angela Bassett's in there as the jazz musician Dorothy. Graham Norton, the British talk show host, and
Richard Ayoade.
That was it for me. Like as soon as sometimes you just hear a voice, and you're like, oh, it's Moss. If you don't know who Richard Ayoade is, please look up the IT Crowd. Please look up the IT Crowd. Forget the fact that the guy who created it's a piece of shit. It's a great TV show. And he's a fine director in his own right. And it was lovely to hear him pop up as one of the counselors in there. And I was like, that's Richard Ayoade. And there's completely distracted every time he was on screen. This film is directed by Pete Docter and Kemp Powers. Pete Docter,
he has never done anything before.
I was going to say, if we have a conversation occasionally about directors who are on hot streaks, if we were talking about directors who are on a hot streak now in their career, I think you could argue Denis Villeneuve is on a hot streak. Hasn't done anything bad. Depending on what you thought of Tenet, you might say Christopher Nolan. But I don't think anybody would say Pete Docter, but they absolutely should. I think Pete Docter is on the greatest hot streak in cinema, but I think we've seen it for a long time. So what's he done?
Yeah, since 2001, he burst onto the screen with his feature film debut, the animated classic Monsters, Inc. Then his next full feature was 2009's Up. Then he did 2015's Inside Out, and now he's done 2020's Soul. So
he wrote the original story for Toy Story, Toy Story 2 as well. He wrote the story for WALL-E. This guy's a freak.
Yeah, he's probably the reason why. He's probably that secret sauce as to why Pixar still make great movies, because he is, and Soul is prime example of this. I mean, every single movie that he has directed has had, except for maybe Monsters, Inc., all of them have had much more adult, genuine, serious relationship conversations and personal development conversations, and things to talk about and things to say beyond just being that stereotypical animated family movie. And this movie is about the afterlife and the before life and the meaning of life, and so many of those big fucking questions that we challenge ourselves with every fucking day. And he makes it in this engaging way that makes you think about it after you finish watching it and being enthralled by it. It makes sense throughout the whole thing. He has his set of rules that his movies adhere to, and he sticks to them. He's a genius.
It's remarkable. I mean, I think I posted on Facebook after this. There's something going on down at Pixar. There's something going on. They've sold their soul to a devil of some description, a la Robert Johnson, the blues musician. I mean, they don't. I'll put my hand up and say there have been a couple I haven't seen recently. I haven't seen Coco, and there was one that came out, I think, last year, which I haven't seen. But they don't make bad films. I mean, they haven't had a car crash of a movie. I mean, if Cars 2 is the worst thing your studio has ever put out, then, geez, what's some kind of studio?
Yeah.
And beyond that, yes, they started out doing, we think about Toy Story, it was really almost a proof of concept that CGI animation could be done well, and what a classic that is. But as you sort of noted there, they've evolved beyond, look, even Monsters, Inc. is a wonderful little film, but as you say, they've really evolved now to be actually telling very complex stories, very mature stories about the nature of existence. And you can still take your kids, and they're not going to be bored, and they're not going to be grossed out. I mean, these films are all still very wholesome in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, I actually demanded a few of my friends, demands is the right word, watch this film, and they absolutely were blown away and loved it. Their kids blown away and loved it. But you can have two different age groups sit through a film like this and be blown away and love it for completely different reasons. That is incredible filmmaking.
And let's just point out, there is not a single studio production company in the working film industry that has this much of a successful run. Starting in 1995 with Toy Story, then going on to A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up, Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, Finding Dory, Cars 3, Coco, Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4, Onward, Soul. Not a flop.
And not even, it's not a flop. I mean, films can be terrible films and still make a lot of money. Like Bad Boys for Life was the highest grossing film of last year. Doesn't mean it was any good. But not only are they not flops, each one of them is both, I would argue, a very high quality film for its time, and incredibly influential in its own way. Well, most of them anyway, right? I mean, the vast majority of very influential films and very high quality films. Whereas it's kind of a gold standard of animation. Well, it absolutely is the gold standard of animation now. It's insane how successful these films are. And I think, to come back again, I think the most impressive thing for me is you can tell a story here now, which is essentially about death. And I tell my friends, I don't actually have any idea what is okay for kids and what isn't, apart from, Pulp Fiction's probably not.
Not if it was remade with Muppets and they didn't use any naughty words.
Hey, look, apparently The Great Gatsby has come into the public domain now, and there's been talk of remaking it with the Muppets. So
there is not a single movie that would not be bettered by having Muppets remake it.
So I use a website called Common Sense Media, which a friend of mine I used to work with put me onto. So it's actually quite a helpful one if you have children or you're around children and you're a little bit like me and you don't actually have any children. You're like, I was watching Soul and I was like, this is actually a little bit dark in parts, right? It might be, some of the themes are a little bit on the darker side. I'm like, how old is old enough for this film? And Common Sense Media actually has the parents and the kids rating about what they think. And so they would say with Soul, it's got given an 8+ rating for them, as opposed to, I think, Inside Out a bit before that. But I mean, if you go to Inside Out, it's a story about becoming who you are, and almost at some points your emotions and mental illness to some degree as well, I suppose, is in there. And again, this one says 6 and up, according to Common Sense Media, which I find a good measure for this kind of thing. So, I mean, these are they're telling great stories, but they've got they're important stories as well, and really important. I mean, I don't want to use the word, but important lessons for young people who are watching them, I think. I don't know about you, but I grew up with Sesame Street when I was a kid. I don't know if that aired in the UK as much as it did here. But I think there's a great example of television which did a very similar thing 30, 40 years ago. I don't know if it still does. I think it's fairly progressive now. I think that maybe it's probably because of their success that they don't lose money. They've never had a flop. That they now have complete creative freedom now to basically. Are you being interrogated by the KGB or something at the moment?
I said too much.
We've got to find the jade monkey before the next full moon.
We found the jade monkey.
But they have this complete freedom now. They go, imagine if you took Soul. I want to make a children's animated film about death to DreamWorks. Yeah, you fuck off.
Well, that's the thing. I think the secret thing that I think Pixar have managed to do with their movies is what the Henson Company did so well in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, where they were unafraid to do things that would most likely scare younger kids. but not do it in a "you're gonna have nightmares about this." It was just they did things. They put the heroes of their stories in dangerous environments, so it's okay to be scared. You can fight through. You can be the hero. Whereas this, they're kind of taking a more metaphysical approach with the Pixar movies and going, yes, death is scary, but it's okay to talk about it. Yes, it's bad when you just can't control yourself because angry so much, but it's okay to talk about it and start dialogues with it. And they're using them as learning tools, and that makes it approachable. It's approachable for adults and kids because it's presented in this childlike wonderment way, but it's these topics that kind of feel more like they should be in the domain of adult conversation. You shouldn't talk about the notion of death and the afterlife with the child.
Definitely be something that people encounter, young people encounter. And you make an excellent point that I have to imagine, again, neither of us are parents, but if you did have a kid and you wanted to actually have a talk to him about death or Inside Out being about, mental health and feeling your emotions and that kind of thing and coming of age. And what a great kicking off point for a conversation. Yeah. It would be to sit down and watch Soul with your 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever, and say, okay, well, what did you think of that? How did that make you feel when this happened? And did you know that happens in real life? And how would you feel if grandpa was all of a sudden journeying the great beyond? We all go to, blah, blah, blah. What a great way to start that conversation. Yeah. I have to imagine it's not an easy conversation to have with your kids.
No, absolutely not. I mean, but being able to kind of go, oh, do you remember in Up? It's like, oh yeah, it's like you remember how sad the old man got when his wife died. It's like, yes, like, well, that's what your grandmother is going through at the moment. Is you can bring it into and use it as a learning and coaching tool for these things, and they do it with so much stuff. It's all over the place. The idea of like looking at WALL-E, which is probably my favorite Pixar movie.
Mine too.
An entity that builds its own personality by being alone and having one friend and wanting to reach out and meet people and greet people. And I was very, very much that person when I was a kid. I was quite often alone and being in a little village in the middle of nowhere. So like, no, I want to go out. I want to see what the world has got to offer. I've got this box that shows me the singing, all dancing, wonderful world out there. I want to experience that. And I latched onto that as a character. And then suddenly having this alien entity of Eve come down and sort of like, that's, yeah, okay, cool. I can connect with that, and I can imagine that so many now generations of kids go through the same thing. And these are perfectly safe movies to be able to like still showing Toy Story 1. Yes, visually it has aged because animation has become so much more nuanced and better quality, but the story behind it, that idea of being replaced by whatever's new, my God, that is relevant. Ageless. From my best friend doesn't hang out with me anymore because we went up to the next grade and now he's hanging out with other people. It's like, well, just think about Woody and Buzz. I was like, oh, I'm in a new job and they don't like me because I'm different. It's like, just think about Woody and Buzz.
I think you make a fine point there. If the message they inject into their films is strong and it managed to do so without being preachy, or cheesy, or saccharine. Like a lot of Disney films do kind of have that saccharine, always be yourself and you can do anything kind of vibe to them, which Pixar's kind of saying the same thing. But it's kind of like the cool kid, who you want to listen to. Yeah. You can do anything instead of the dweeb, you know what I mean? Like, two other things I'd like to quickly talk about with Soul. One being a little heavier. That I think what I really enjoyed, the themes they injected in here, is about you don't always have to be chasing your purpose. There's a whole focus on the, I got to find my purpose. This is my life's purpose. This is what I'm here to do. And that's, and Joe is sort of like so set on this idea that I'm here to create music and be a jazz musician. And it's everything I've ever wanted to do and all I ever wanted to do. But I think the message at the end of a film was, it's okay to actually just live your life and live a good life along the way, doing worthwhile things. And it's okay if you don't actually have that purpose or you're not living what you think that purpose is.
Yeah.
By the end of the film,
passion that isn't your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not all about your purpose. Living, you're okay. It's okay to just live your life, right? I mean, I think it's a fair point because, gosh, how many people do you think we know who are living their life's purpose? I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. And I think we have a mutual friend who went out of their way to try and live their life's purpose fairly recently, which involved a fair bit of schooling. It kind of had a bit of a rude shock once they've actually started doing it, which actually kind of mirrors Joe's experience in the film. So, I enjoyed that message because I think that's an important one. I think there's a lot of pressure put on kids. You got to find your purpose. Life's meaningless if you don't have one.
Yeah, yes, granted, it is great to seek out your purpose because it's so great to be able to say, I'm passionate about this, I'm passionate about that. But there is a difference between passion and purpose, and there is no purpose. Yeah, that's my thought of it. Is like purpose is tangential. Are you a good person? Are you enjoying your life? Are you not hurting people?
Are you doing good work? In his case, he's a teacher.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation many times. What a desperately undervalued profession being a teacher is. They get crap money and no respect, and then people wonder why good people don't become teachers. It's a wonderful purpose. He's actually living a very, very worthwhile life as it is, even without being a jazz musician. Yeah. And so I think there's definitely an element of be careful what you wish for in there.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to quickly point out, and this is something that we should have all seen coming if we know anything about soul. But yet again, I found myself halfway through the film going, geez, what an interesting score this film has. What a wonderful score this film has. I'm like going a couple of points, I'm like, this is great. I wonder who did the score for this film. And I'd actually completely forgotten that I knew who'd done the score for this film. It is, of course, the Academy Award winner, Trent Reznor. And this man himself, the man on my T-shirt right here, covered in mud, at Woodstock 94, and Atticus Ross, who, of course, won the Oscar for The Social Network. They did the score for Soul. And mainly, though, I think they did the score in the Great Before and the Great After. I don't know, but they did a lot of the music on Earth. But quite a departure for the guys from Nine Inch Nails.
But that's kind of, you look at, let's just look at Atticus Ross music, and the themes and the ideals behind the music that are created still kind of fit into the kind of experimental element of Nine Inch Nails. And there'll be people who might listen to Nine Inch Nails and go, oh, it's just lots of screaming and lots of bass and it's all very aggressive and angry. It's like, hey, listen deeper. It's kind of, when you listen to a Tool album, and you listen to it as from track A to track Z, you go through and there's a story being told and reason behind everything beyond just we're doing this to make lots of noise or we're doing this to aggravate you. There's a lot of emotional development in everything that they're doing, and that kind of translates to good accompanying music in movies. And like the Book of Eli, Atticus Ross did that, and the score is I really love the score that he does in that movie. The movie itself is kind of middling. It's all right. It's not great, but the music fits the world and fits the journey of the character so well. And it's that I think that's part of what makes them so good at what they do. Is there's always been this kind of cinematic element to the music that they have created as this really iconic band, and as professional composers for the cinematic experience of our lives. And it's an unusual, when you think about it and go, oh, the guys behind Nine Inch Nails did the music in a Pixar movie. Yeah, that sounds kind of weird. But then when you actually look at the way that they construct the music in Nine Inch Nails, how they utilize it and use it, that makes a lot more sense on a mechanical level to me. And it's like, all right, I get it. And especially considering all of the stuff that we've talked about, the meaning in the movie and the journey that the characters have, it just makes so much more sense.
Also, if you've listened to anything Nine Inch Nails have released in the last 10 years or so, it actually makes quite a bit of sense to be doing these kind of soundtracks. And it's not really a massive departure from the kind of work they do other places as well. Lots of little electronic bleeps and bloops kind of thing. It actually may inspire me to go back and listen to the Social Network soundtrack again, because I really do love that. But it's not a world away. The stuff that people remember Nine Inch Nails for, like Closer, the really loud, angry, metally stuff, that's probably not really what they've been making recently. More recently, it's been soundscapey kind of stuff, which, as a fan, I'm like, well, that's what you want to do. It's what you want to do. I don't like it as much as I did the old stuff, but I mean, I don't know if you know, but they actually, Trent Reznor actually had a hit record, I think, either last year or the year before, because he was one of his records was sampled in the Old Town Road song that was a big hit with like Billy Ray Cyrus in it and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
What was that one in the Black Mirror?
That was Head Like a Hole, but that was re-recorded as I'm on a Roll.
Yeah. It's just as a gentle thing, the thing that kind of really made Nine Inch Nails. Yeah, if you look at it very basically, kids, Nine Inch Nails, you wouldn't generally mix those two mediums together, but when you look at it, as I say, on a mechanical level and the way that Nine Inch Nails have evolved as well, it makes all the sense in the world.
I think they're some of the. I think they're. I mean, obviously, I'm biased because I'm a huge Trent Reznor fan, but I think they're wonderful composers who do great work. I mean, I really enjoyed their work on Watchmen earlier in the year. They were pretty decent in Girl with a Dragon Tattoo a few years ago. Social Network's great. I just think they don't do anything. They do what they do well. I'll say that much. But it's a nice little. I don't know, and I swear to God, I had completely forgotten that Trent Reznor did the soundtrack for this film, and found myself on a couple of occasions sort of going, "This is really interesting music." And it always seems to happen, and I look it up and I'm like, oh, that was Trent Reznor who did it. What a weird...
I have such good taste.
It's just sort of weird how, like, even when he's doing quiet, composery stuff, which really isn't typically up my musical alley, I can still sort of notice what he's doing, and it's sort of really it's really my kind of jam. So I think that's 2 strong thumbs up for Soul, and I want some of what they're taking at Pixar.
Yeah. I'll say, for anyone, the one group that I would say might have issue with Soul is if you are very devoutly religious.
There's certainly no religious overtones in this.
There is no religious overtone to this, and if you are very, very devout in your belief system, whatever it is, I'm not obviously Christianity. This is not any form of the Christianity faith, but any other faith. Thinking basically any of the big faiths of the world. This flies in the face of that, and it just shows you something else. You may possibly, if you are in that very devout environment, might not want to show your kid this because it's going to raise some questions potentially.
I would argue that you should show. If you are a religious person, you should definitely show this to your child, because I think it'll initiate a conversation for you. And that said, though, I don't think you'll want to.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think you should.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Speaking from the devout family perspective, yeah, it's like, no. Jesus died for our sins and we go to heaven. That's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ned Flanders approach.
Yeah. I do all the things, even with the ones that contradict themselves.
The other thing. Ned, have you actually ever read this thing? Technically, we're not allowed to go to the bathroom.
By reading this from cover to cover, you have actually forfeited your soul to Satan. What?
I think that was a real treat and interesting to see that drop on Disney Plus. And honestly, I think I would be open to seeing that on the big screen somewhere if it gets a drive-in release or a release at like the Astor or something like that.
Just on that note, I am kind of surprised considering Soul and Wonder Woman. I think they actually came out on the same day, technically, and Wonder Woman 84 was the first of the Warner Brothers catalog to do this simultaneous release of streaming on their HBO Plus and in cinemas. And obviously, situation in America is far worse over here. We're actually able to go to the cinema, but it wasn't is not available for streaming over here. Whereas Soul went straight to Disney Plus and just completely avoided cinema. So it's strange how they could have comfortably put, it's a Pixar movie.
They could have made all the money, but I guess
they chose not to.
There's actually a movement in Australia. Cinema owners are actually pushing the government to legislate for cinematic windows. Because I think the exhibitors now are seeing which way the wind's blowing. Obviously, the only thing stopping Wonder Woman going straight to streaming here is that HBO don't have an offering in this market.
Yeah, it's all through third parties, which they don't get to control. But it's so interesting considering Disney are notoriously aggressive with demanding slots and demanding huge percentages back from cinemas. It's interesting to see that in a market where cinemas are still open and still a viable option, they didn't push it with Soul. And
also interesting that they didn't charge that extra surcharge they charged for Mulan.
Mulan, yeah. Which, again, maybe that was like, all right, we tried that and that failed. That was a mistake. If anything, a Pixar movie, and as we noted before, they haven't had a box office or critical response fail in their 15 years of making movies. That's the kind of successful horse that you want to back for an unusual practice, shall we say. Because people will pay admittance for Pixar. Whereas a remake of Mulan, where you don't have the talking dragon with Eddie Murphy's voice, it's a little different. It's not necessarily a guarantee, mind you, to be fair. Every single one of the live-action remakes that they've made has been a fucking monster at the box office, and it kills my soul a little bit every time.
I know, maybe that was an experiment for them to go, hey, will we get away with it? And who knows what because I don't know if they actually report this stuff, but they didn't get away with it. They didn't get away with it. Not enough people bought it, and they thought, well...
It's been an interesting year for Disney Plus because we've had three very different pop culture elements on the platform with very varying degrees of success. Soul was an absolute masterpiece of a movie, proving incredibly successful. No doubt it's going to be adding millions of subscribers to Disney Plus, or at least those 7-day trialers. Then you had Mulan doing this unusual pricing practice, which people did not like, that aggressive pricing, and the movie was at best middling. And then we had we'll put it onto, because of COVID, we'll put it onto the streaming service, Artemis Fowl, based on a very popular children's book series. I'm a fan of that series, and that bombed. It was a disaster of a movie. No one talks about it. I don't think it's ever once come up on the the front landing page of the Disney Plus for me, or when I've walked past and Shay's been watching or anything like that. It's kind of the forgotten stepchild. And it's interesting to see these 3 different movies from different points in the year. And we started with Mulan. Aggressive pricing didn't work. Then we had just this dump of, we need content on our platform and cinemas aren't open. Let's just chuck that on there. We know it's not going to do very well. We're not going to market it. Fine. Yep. Forget it. Done. And then we have this masterpiece finish around the same time that they then announce prequels to Buzz Lightyear and all of those Disney shows and the Star Wars shows and all of that stuff coming to Disney Plus. They have suddenly, I think they've kind of gone, yep, we know exactly how to use this platform for our medium, especially in the COVID world.
And you know, we were right again. We were on board Disney Plus from day one. We said it would be successful. We certainly didn't question why Disney, who already owned Hulu, was starting their own streaming service. That didn't happen.
No.
This show. I don't know why people sign up for Disney Plus full time. I would sign up for a week, watch The Mandalorian, and then jump out. Like, I don't, just to watch what? Old Disney cartoons.
That's it. It's nostalgia. That's what they're selling, and that's what people want. They want to feel comfortable in this crazy weird world that we live in right now. And for $8.99 a month, you get that at your fingertips, and you get lots of all the new Star Wars, which is so amazing and fantastic. And blah blah blah.
I haven't seen the new season of Mandalorian. Have you watched it yet?
No, I have no interest.
You weren't on board. The first season was really good. And but I think I pretty much had the big twist at the end of the second season spoiled for me already. So I don't.
I'll get around to it.
I'll get around to it eventually as well. But I'm like, apart from that, I mean, other than the occasional Pixar film and the odd, thing here, there, and there dropping, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of first run content going on Disney Plus right now.
Well, there's not really on any platform, and all of the new content that is coming out, the new series, suddenly they're all changing their platform process of, instead of dumping a whole season, they're going week by week because they need to draw it out for as long as possible. That's it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. But I have that many bloody streaming services now. I might as well just go back to playing for fucking cable. It's it's ridiculous. But this is the life. We do this for you, dear listener and viewers, so you don't have to.
Yep. It's why I watch Adam Sandler movies.
Somebody's
doing a public service.
Dirty work, but someone's got to do it. How are you feeling? I reckon this is long enough for tonight.
I think it's been long enough. Yeah, we will save our other topics of conversation for next time.
George's been watching Twin Peaks, and I'm very excited to hear what he thinks of the third season because I never got around to watching all of it. And I'll be talking about a new Alex Gibney documentary called Totally Under Control.
And of course, we will be going on with our chain movies to the classic Carlito's Way.
Right.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. And thank you so much to Mel and to Sean for dropping in on the conversation there. And yes, I'll look into seeing about donations. If you really want to keep us money,
drop into the conversation, you can do that. Follow the Fry Brain Productions Facebook page. George is actually pretty good at letting you know when we're going to go live. It's usually Wednesday evenings in Australia. So work that out in your own time frame box.
Yeah. But yeah, this is good night from me. Good night from my people who are determined to get me to answer the question. And good night from Travis.
Good night, everyone.